Good evening. I'm here to refute the claim counting non-citizens in the census for the purpose of reapportionment will most likely have a negative impact on the democratic process in the United States, made by Jeff Harley. I will talk about how the first supporting claim that the assumptions made when the Constitution was framed are misunderstood actually goes against the main claim of the argument by showing an example of states inflating their own population to gain more power in the government. And also about how the example of Ohio versus California in supporting Claim 3, that areas with a higher non-citizen population have more political power per citizen. The vote of the individual citizen is diluted, is not sound, in that the voters in Ohio marginally have the same power as the voters in California. For supporting Claim 1, in this argument's first supporting claim, an article by Mr. John S. Baker, a constitutional law teacher at Louisiana State University, and Mr. Elliot Stonesifer, a pollist and Democratic analyst, state the counting of illegal immigrants in the census will unconstitutionally increase the number of representatives in some states and deprive others of their rightful political representation. Prior to this statement, the argument stated two facts: that the Constitution states all free persons should be counted, used to exclude non-taxed Indians and the Three-Fifths Compromise for slaves, and also that the 14th Amendment repeals the Three-Fifths Compromise in 1868. While this does show the assumptions made when the Constitution was framed are now misunderstood, the abolishment of slavery in the southern states allowed for voting inflation for these states. Because of the sudden increase in population with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, southern states' populations dramatically increased, taking away seats in the government from northern states, which had no slaves. So in supporting Claim 3, bear with me, this one has a little bit of math in it. In the argument's third supporting claim, areas with a higher non-citizen population have more political power per citizen. The vote of the individual citizen is diluted. Facts are presented by the 2006 to 2008 American Community Survey about how California, a state with a higher population of non-citizens, has 53 seats, while Ohio, a state with a low population of non-citizens, has 18. Then the argument states how, according to the same survey, if we were to exclude non-citizens, California would have 8 representatives, or do have 8 representatives extra, while Ohio's number is negligible. And while this still puts California far ahead of Ohio in seats, the proportion of undeserved seats is equal in Ohio and California. This is where the math comes in. If you account for the voter turnout of Ohio, approximately 50% at the 2008 presidential election, along with the potential losses of representatives if non-citizens are excluded from the census, negligible amount, you are left with 9 seats. In California, starting at its 53 seats, we remove 8 seats due to the loss of representation of non-citizens, leaving us with 45. We then multiply that number by the voter turnout in California, approximately 60% in the 2008 presidential election, which equals 27 seats. While this math may seem tedious and unnecessary, if you compare the number of representatives, we see that Ohio voters, a state with a negligible number of non-citizens, marginally has the same as the voters in California. 9 in Ohio, exactly half of their total seats now, versus 27 in California, a small margin lower than our original seats as of now. In summary, the first supporting claim that the assumptions made when the Constitution was framed are misunderstood actually goes against the main claim of the argument by showing an example of states inflating their own populations to gain more power in the government, and also about how the example of Ohio versus California in supporting Claim 3, that areas with a higher non-citizen population have more political power per citizen, is not sound in that voters in Ohio marginally have the same power as the voters in California. Thank you very much.
All right, the main claim of the advocate was listed. The secondary claims were only partially listed. You kind of preview what your argument is going to be, and it sounds like the emphasis is going to be on point number 3. Point number 2 ends up being skipped over entirely, and there might be very valid issues that are discussed there. If we were in the debate and we could recall what those issues were, I think you'd be in a little bit of difficulty on that. When you skip down to that third point, you've got an elaborate explanation about how you have tried to explain what the marginal value of the votes is. It is premised on a concept that turnout is a relevant factor in evaluating the impact of those votes. Of course, we were dealing with an actual vote in 2008, but let's imagine hypothetical differences where one state had 90% turnout and the other had just a 50% turnout. That would certainly screw up the comparison that you're making here. So I think that's a little bit problematic, but I did like the way that you tried to explain that concept. You did a good job on that. On the first point where you were, you've got a good signpost there, you cite the advocate's quote, and then you get kind of bogged down in this whole constitutional discussion about what it all represents. I'm not sure how your explanation either responds to or contradicts the advocate's point. It's fairly clear what you're saying, but how am I supposed to interpret it in light of what the advocate said? That needed to be clarified. All right, thank you.